On the 15th of July, 2016, and Mary and I are leaving for Alaska. We're leaving the great old town of Seattle. Tried to get the Space Needle, but it escaped me. But as you can see, it's a lovely sunny day in Seattle. And perhaps that's something that you don't see too often. I was kind of interested in this sailboat coming out of the pier area there. And the next morning, we found ourselves on another sunny day looking out at the green hills of British Columbia. And we saw a number of ferries, which is about the only way you can get around in this part of the world. And the captain was talking in the background about the going through the Narrows, which is up ahead of us and which actually requires a pilot. Then we arrived at the town of Ketchikan, which is clearly the liveliest town in at least the parts of Alaska that we saw on this trip, filled with people and activity, buses, and just an awful lot of things going on, particularly as compared to the rest of our trip, the cities that we visited.
Lots of people.
You can see the people down below here waiting for tours, and the tourist center there, and then looking back down the waterway from where we came, and there's Mary and the bow of the Oceania Regatta. This day, on one of our adventures, we went on a crab fest on that boat, and there is a crab, and there is Mary with an artificial crab after we had eaten more crab than we really needed to, and you can see Mary looks pretty full. Next day, we moved on to Wrangell, very small town, and prepared to take a cruise up the Stickeen River to the Shakes Lake and Glacier. The Stickeen River is one of the fastest flowing rivers in North America, and you can see if you look out the windows, there's all sorts of debris, and we were going very fast, so it was quite an exciting ride. Although the glacier itself, compared to ones that we saw later, was fairly benign. There's Mary with the glacier you can barely see in the background. There's a piece of ice there that looks almost like a sailfish. And then you can see in this next shot here, Shakes Glacier in the background. There it is right there. We went back to the town and wandered around, took a picture of this totem pole next to the post office, and back to the ship, and back on board and getting ready to go on to Juneau, the capital of Alaska. And I must say, in looking at Juneau, we were kind of underwhelmed because after Ketchikan, it seems quite mild, and even after we had a chance to roam around a little bit, it doesn't seem to have the personality that Ketchikan does. Perhaps that's because it's a capital city and it's more sedate. After the city of Juneau, we went to a salmon hatchery. And there is the ladder that the salmon go back up when they return to their home. And here's Mary talking about that. She got all excited about that ladder. Next we went to a forest garden where a couple from the United States had actually been working on this forest garden for 35 years. And it was a lovely spot with all sorts of jungle vegetation. There's the guy that he and his wife built this place. And then we went on to the Mendenhall Glacier, which was considerably bigger than the Shakes Glacier we'd seen the day before. You can see it in the background there across a field of wildflowers. And then we moved up. There's a big tourist center and whatnot, and wandered around and checked everything out. The next day we went to Haines, which is another very small town. And you can see from the elevation of the dock that that's Haines in the background there, that we were, the water level was way down below the dock. So in many of these little towns we had to be ferried around the ship via lifeboats, actually. And here we are going to take our hike that day. And that's Katie, who was a cute little travel guide. That woman coming out of the bus there lasted about 200 yards and had to go back. And when took one of our guides with her, that man there fell down twice. And we thought we were going to have to get a helicopter to get him out of there, but somehow he pulled himself together and made it home back to the bus. But not before we had to bring out the supervisor. Actually, it was another young woman who came out and gave us all the support that we needed. And we started down the trail, and I almost bumped into Mary and then a tree. But I was trying to get that effect of walking down the trail. And Katie, I think, was pointing out poisonous bushes. That's the guy that fell down with his wife. I love that picture. It reminded me something out of Norman Rockwell. And here's Mary trying to tell us something about that pine tree there, whether it was a hemlock or something else.
Come up here and light the fire.
The next day we moved on to Hubbard Glacier, which compared to the other two we had seen was quite awesome. We spent quite a bit of time here, and there's a lot of talk about how close you get, and nobody's ever been that close before. But I guess it is quite impressive. Particularly if you happen to be a glaciologist, which we of course aren't. Mary talked a lot about the calving, and you could hear the thunder of calving in the background, but except for a little one right about here somewhere, we really didn't see much of it. But you could certainly hear it.
Ice collectors down here.
There's a boat that they sent out from the ship to pick up glacier ice. Not sure exactly why. Ice is ice, I would think, but I'm sure people went down to see what the boat had retrieved.
Anyway, it's very exciting.
I believe it's about 4 stories high. We're maybe a mile off the ice. Next day we moved on to Sitka, which is where the Russians arrived in the early 1800s.
So that's most of what
and we went on a boat tour, a wildlife tour actually, where they actually guaranteed if we didn't see wildlife, they'd pay you $100. And we did. We saw eagles and whales.
Now we do have primarily red alder here, although we have some Sitka
all
alder
sorts
as well.
of other stuff. That's Mary looking like Robin Hood.
The evergreen trees, those are...
Got a nice eagle flying up here at our 1 o'clock.
There's a whale. The sea otters were the pelts that the Russians came after and actually chased all the way down the coast of Alaska, and that's why they claimed that for Russia, and that's why we ended up getting it for the United States. That's Mary with Baranoff, who was one of the early settlers. And these are just some shots of Sitka. Michener talked a lot about St. Michael's Church, so I wanted to be sure to at least get a picture of that. That's St. Michael's there. We had a day at sea, and then we moved on to Victoria, British Columbia. And this is the approach into Victoria. The feature in Victoria was the Butchart Gardens, which were set up years ago by Mr. and Mrs. Butchart, who had bought the area as a limestone quarry. And this is what his wife achieved over a number of years, and subsequently others, I'm sure. But this is the sunken garden, which has to be about the loveliest garden one has ever seen. Certainly on a par with the botanical gardens we visited in Montreal a couple of years ago. But lots of people there on a Sunday afternoon. And here's Mary trying to identify a particular flower. And then back to more of the sunken garden, I guess. And all kinds of vegetation, trees. You can see how they put trees together with different foliage and different colors. And this is another part of the gardens, Butchart Gardens. This is like a Japanese garden here, with Mary standing over there supervising and looking very much stately in her own right. This is a picture of the gardens around the main building, which houses a restaurant and gift shop and lots of other gardens, lots of people around. And that was about the extent of our trip. After we had some ice cream, which was very nice, a few minutes before this. And then we headed back to the bus. And our next step, well, that's a Gemini rose. Mary and I are both Geminis, and that's the first Gemini rose I've ever seen. And we were fascinated by that white tree there, which kind of stood out amongst everything else. Now back to the bus. And the first area that we went through was Chinatown, which was like any other Chinatown, I guess. It's supposed to be one of the bigger Chinatowns in the world. And then on down to the waterfront, where we visited the Empress Hotel, where they still serve high tea at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is the waterfront, and Tim, who played the classical piano, that's Tim right there, was one of our cohorts on that drive. And there was a little man down there playing some sort of a stringed instrument. This is the Capitol building with George Vancouver, capital of British Columbia, George Vancouver on top. And now we are back on ship and heading home to Seattle and then back to Huntington Beach.